Welcome to the Live Like Eden podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay, and I'm thrilled that you're here. Years ago, out of nowhere, I found myself in a radical shift in consciousness that took me over 20 years to fully wrap my head around. Yes, that's right. It took me a long time, and without any warning, down the rabbit hole of darkness I went. Now I'm here to share with you all the insights of awakening, spirituality, health, the energetic world we're living in, and my absolute favorite topic, just how crazy the ego mind can be. These subjects are designed to help you understand the awakening process, to open your mind, and prepare you for your own unique spiritual journey toward inner peace. So I invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy today's discussion. Before we get started with today's show, I want to share with you something I've been working on. I have created a quiz just for you to see where you are on your own unique spiritual path. Everybody loves a quiz, right? You can go to my website at livelikeeden.com, click on the quiz pop-up, and answer 10 quick questions. You'll get an immediate response emailed to you with your results, a personalized podcast playlist including 5 Live Like Eden episodes that will offer you assistance where you currently are. And I've also thrown in a few bonus episodes that you'll receive a few days later. If you're a spiritual junkie, you're in the midst of awakening, or you're simply curious where you might be in your own spiritual process, check it out and feel free to share with your friends who might be interested too. I just had a great conversation with a dear friend of mine by the name of Peláez. She goes by Jules and founded justjulesnutrition.com. She has been a holistic health coach for over 15 years and has a fabulous detoxification program called the Next Level Detox. It's a 5-day program designed to increase the energy in the body, eliminate and get rid of all of the toxicity that's building up, the inflammation, eliminate waste from the body, shed those extra few pounds that I know all of us are always wanting to shed. Not only will Jules explain her program to you, but we'll dive deep into health topics, the simplicity that she brings to the table versus the overcomplicated nutritional realm today and the overcomplicated health system that we're living in. Is there another way to do it? Is there a simpler way to bring back your health? So I hope you enjoyed today's show. I will link all of Jules's contact information in the show notes for you if you're interested in joining her program, or if you're interested in one-on-one consultations. She does both. I highly recommend her and definitely check her out. So with that being said, I hope you enjoy the conversation. All right, welcome to the show, Jules. I'm so glad to have you with me today.
Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here with you.
I know. Well, as I love to talk on this show, I love health and the body and talking about how we can live sort of feeling better in this world for the time that we're allotted. And I'm so excited to have you on the show because you're a holistic health coach. You helped found the Conscious Cleanse years ago. You've worked with so many people on nutrition and how to get well. And as of late, I know that you have your own program called the Next Level Detox, which I can personally attest to. I've done this, and I would love to hear all about what you do, but I thought it's always fun to hear about how you got into this, sort of your past history, your life story, right? How we all have, how we got to where we are today. So maybe I could just have you start by sharing how you got to where you are today to help people get well. And I do want to fully disclose to the audience that you and I have known each other for 20 years, right? We crossed paths years ago teaching yoga and have been in touch ever since. So she's a personal friend, but also very knowledgeable on this subject. So I'm happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's interesting as I think about my origin story. The yoga studio that you owned and operated was a pivotal time for my evolution. And so I'll get back to that. But, in the early years, I was someone who was always scratching my head when I would eat certain foods and then notice that I didn't feel that great. So like Thanksgiving dinner when I was 9 years old, I mostly was eating the carbs. I was never much of a meat eater. but I literally like passed out underneath the table.
Oh
And when
no.
I came to, I mean, I was literally in a coma, right? Like I took a nap and I didn't get any further than the table. Like I fell asleep under the
Wow.
table and I woke up and I was like, why would we do that? Why would we eat so much that we wanted to fall asleep? So that was when I was 9 years old.
Oh,
And, throughout my young adult years, my gut started talking to me. Constitutionally speaking, that would be my Achilles heel. So I would eat certain things and it wouldn't sit right. I would be doubled over in pain after eating a school lunch and just like
mm,
things weren't working as well as I knew they could be. Fast forward to college, I went to the University of Kansas, and there was very much like this alive hippie community there where, they had the natural foods co-op. And I loved to go to this store and just hang out and buy bulk foods. And I was learning what echinacea was and like always gravitated towards these, natural healing modalities, although that wasn't the way I was raised. Over a summer, I was back east where my parents lived at the time, and I was working with a another woman as a server in an Irish pub. And this woman had a diagnosis of cervical cancer. And she shared with me the Anne Wigmore
oh,
Hippocrates diet, right? The Hippocrates diet and health program. And this, for those people who don't know, Anne Wigmore is like one of the, you know, originators of the natural health movement. I would say a pioneer in the natural health
yeah.
movement. And I don't know if that was the 80s or 90s, maybe, so for sure
Oh,
that
it's a
maybe
long
70s,
time. Yeah.
70s, 80s,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not
been a
sure.
while. I don't know exactly when I mean, she was old when that was too. I mean,
Yeah.
the Hippocrates
Yeah, so she
Institute, right? She
founded the
founded that.
Hippocrates Health Institute. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have her book here because it came up not that long ago. But so this woman that I worked with was, doing wheatgrass shots and enemas and juicing and eating sprouted foods and all this raw living food. And I was like, this is fascinating. So here, when I was 19, 20 years old, I met this woman who was employing these, modalities. And so that at a very, early age really just piqued my interest. And, from that point forward, I was living a pretty unhealthy lifestyle. Like, even though I had this interest, I was a typical college kid and I lived off Mountain Dew and Taco Bell and smoked a pack of cigarettes a day.
The
And
green
yet,
chili burritos.
yeah, I mean, I thought I was like being so healthy because I would crack open a can of refried beans and put tomatoes and
I
sprouts on
know.
it, but like that was the upgrade from Taco Bell. So, I was certainly, not like the picture perfect of health, but I had this interest, and that interest kept following me, like there was a project I had to do my senior year, and I remember you talking about this at one point too, where the topic that I chose was to create a magazine on natural healing, and so like
Yeah.
it's funny how those early years really can dictate, it's sort of like a foreshadowing of where we're going to go.
Yeah, it's like the subconscious is already speaking to us, We're not really aware of it when it's happening, but yeah,
Yeah, it's like
interesting.
the soul is like, just so you know, here's what you're going to be doing. You're going to,
Yeah,
publish a book and write a blog and help, tens of that, 10, 20,000 people with the work that you do.
right.
Maybe more, hopefully more, right, at this point.
You
But
never know because those people tell their friend, it's a ripple effect. It's true.
it
You never know how
is.
many
Yeah.
people you're
So
helping.
that's right. So, I moved to Boulder in 99, really with the idea of studying Bikram yoga, which is where our paths
Yeah,
cross. And it was in the yoga room that this connection again between how food made me feel came back. So, I was very much still eating bagels and pizza and ice cream. And I would notice that if I would do camel pose or a deep back bend, I would feel dizzy and nauseous. And then the days that I didn't eat, things like that. The days that I was eating more healthfully, I didn't feel dizzy and nauseous and want to run out of the room screaming.
yeah.
So I got back into this love of food, and one day I decided like, I'm gonna go all raw. And I got this book ordered. I think I must have gotten it from a bookstore. It was the chef Julian, who's like a gourmet chef. And I opened the book and it was like, sprout your whatever for 7 days. And I closed the book. I was like, oh, I guess I'm not going raw today because I don't know how to eat. I don't even know anything about this. So it was sort of like a non-starter.
Yeah.
And when after we started, after I started teaching at your studio, you had introduced me to a book called The Raw Food Detox
I
Diet.
remember that.
And yeah, that bridged the gap. And it was basically like, oh, this is not an extreme, although a lot of people might think it's extreme. It wasn't
Yeah.
as extreme as, soak everything for 7 days and then, eat sprouts.
Right.
I was like, oh, I was sold. And, that really, I would say in many ways informed the path that I'm on today. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, you
How
can
did
thank
you
my
guys
mom.
find that book?
You
Yeah,
can
your
thank
mom
my
found that
mom.
book.
Yeah. My mom is the one that showed me, she was struggling with health at the time and she really got on a kick. And then I remember, I was in the weirdest place and then I was sharing it with everyone. And I do remember you really, yeah, dove right into it. Well, that's a great starting book to get into better health. I think that's a great book because it's not extreme. It's got a lot of different options. It's not just go cold turkey, do this. So,
Well, what it introduced me to this idea, and this is an idea that I still weave into my work today, is that we need to be gentle. Like it doesn't have to be so harsh and it doesn't have to be so black and white and it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
hmm
Like if you just start simply adding one thing at a time, after a certain period of time, all of a sudden you've added maybe 3 or 4 healthy habits that add up to you being a healthier, vibrant person than you were before you started that one thing. And again, it could
right.
just be one thing in the beginning.
Absolutely. Because, I mean, if you think about people that are just eating the standard American diet, or like you said, you're just eating fast food, and that's most people, right? Um, if you just take out one item, just take out one thing, whether it's meat or dairy or one item that you eat all the time, you will notice a change. And then
You
it's
will.
like a
Yeah, I think
trickle effect. Yeah.
Yeah, I think gluten is a big one for people. That's really
hmm
sort of a hot topic in recent,
Yeah.
years and the last decade. When I started the conscious cleanse in, let's see, 2010, eating gluten was really still or being gluten free was still very much on the fringe.
Yeah.
It was not as much in the culture as it is today. Now you go to restaurants and they've got all the icons. They're vegan, dairy free, gluten free, and that's been dictated by people like us who are asking for it, like,
Yeah.
how can I eat healthier and better, you
Yeah.
know
What's your
so
take on the gluten perspective? I know there's people who think that it's maybe not necessarily the gluten, that it's the way that the wheat is sprayed with chemicals and glyphosate and all these things. But I know there are a very small part of the population truly has an allergy to gluten, like regardless. But it's such a large number of people today. I was just curious, what are your thoughts on that in that world?
I think it's similar to what you just said, which is like if you remove gluten from your diet, you remove most fast foods and processed foods and convenience foods. And now, the industry is sort of caught on and they're like, oh, let's make gluten-free everything. And so, there's now you can still get gluten-free packaged products. But I think at the idea of removing something like gluten without going into all the other packaged foods variations, I think you can have a huge improvement on your health, your
Yeah.
gut health. And then, like you're saying, the reduction of the influence or the exposure to something like glyphosate, which is an endocrine disruptor, messes with the hormones. It's terrible for the gut.
Right.
The list really goes on and on about how terrible glyphosate is, and we are getting exposed to it more than we probably realize.
Yeah.
So I don't think everybody, I think the thing about gluten too is if you imagine, when your kids were little, did you ever take flour and water and make it into a paste
I
and
was
let them
just
do like a
thinking this.
craft? Yeah, I was not a very crafty mom. And so no, I'm
No,
not knocking you if you don't know what that is, but it's sticky.
I know what it is, but I did not do that with my children. You don't know
It
what
was not
paper
much.
mache is in my house. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's sticky. It is
Yeah.
sticky. And so when you
Mhm.
think about, you know, creating ease and flow and openness in the body, that the presence of something like gluten is very sticky. And
Right.
so again, I think removing it removes one of those obstacles to making your body not work as hard potentially.
Yeah. Well, and then you get into the whole starches in general. That's leaving residue, right? The clogging in the system. Maybe you can speak more about that. Today, the medical world wants to dissect every little part of our body into a, file cabinet drawer system with all the files in between, and that we have little diseases, right? And there's a doctor for everything. And I feel like there's such an overcomplication of our own system that nobody knows anymore what to do, who to trust, what's right, what's wrong. It's almost like our internal computer and intuition of our own system that we're living in and inhabiting in this life is completely gone. And we're handing over our power to everybody else's opinion. What do you think about simplifying what is really the cause of our health trouble? Is it really as simple as one cause and one remedy?
Well, I mean, I think you pose a really good point in an era of specialization. We think we need to go to the specialist for everything, and then we, like you said, discount our own inner knowing. I think the most empowering thing we can do is learn how our body works. And in a large way, that has to do with, learning what the root cause is. And I know we both share an interest in the mucusless healing diet system,
Mhm.
this idea that was pioneered more than 100 years ago by Professor Arnold Ehret, who says that the one cause of all dis-ease in the body is congestion or constipation, is what he calls it.
Mhm.
I don't like the word constipation because in the modern day, we think I haven't gone to the bathroom for a few days, so
Right.
I'm constipated. He was talking about a cellular constipation, being constipated really at this systemic level. So the congestion is, a buildup of mucus, toxins, residue, like things that the waste that the body can't get rid of. And I think when we look at the body from that perspective, which is, I believe, a very naturopathic, a very natural health way to look at the body, we can actually create the conditions for the body to heal itself. And that's not to say that there isn't a place for traditional or Western medicine,
Right.
but there is this idea that the outside world is constantly trying to encourage us to give our power to someone or something else outside of us.
Right.
And I think you and I are like, we're saying, actually, let's come back to ourselves. Let's
Yeah.
come back to nature. Let's learn how this body works. And does it have to be so complicated? Like, can we just simplify? I mean, in my world of nutrition, it has gotten so complicated where I
Yeah.
think so many people are just like, forget it. I don't care. I don't want to talk about it anymore. You
Yeah.
know, or they've made themselves sick thinking about potentially eating the wrong thing or the wrong way. So
Right.
now they have another illness, which
Hmm.
is more maybe an illness, of their mind, of the mindset, and they get wrapped up in the emotional side of not understanding how their own body works.
Yeah. And then you're like micromanaging every little detail of your diet. It's like, well, that's interesting because the medical world, I mean, most doctors that I've ever come across, I don't know about you, they don't really suggest that diet has any bearing on your health, that it's all genetics and that's basically hearsay. And I know we know in the medical schools they don't really get nutrition. And I know, would argue that the nutrition information, even if you were to get it, is still strange. It's still not
Yeah.
totally great, right? Um,
Well, right, because it's based on the standard American diet
yeah,
and a very outdated set of guidelines that has come from a corrupt government that is really there to support industry, right?
right.
Not necessarily what's best. And I think we are in a time where all of that is coming up for um, reevaluation, which I think gets
Yeah.
very exciting. I'm hopeful, with the red dye coming out of the food supply in 2 years from now.
Two
We're
years.
making strides. 2 years,
Oh my gosh, I know. Like, I guess we have to
but
start somewhere.
we have to start somewhere. Yeah. Well, and the thing is like, don't wait for industry to catch up. I mean, there is a very strong natural food movement that, it's a decade ahead of the industry and the government, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
we have to forge that path and continue to do so. And we do so, like I said, by voting, with our dollars, by, buying produce from farmers markets and buying organic and requesting organic and,
Yep.
asking for gluten free at the restaurants and those types of things.
Yeah.
It does take time.
Well, and it is exciting to see that we are seeing some changes in our health in the government. So I'm excited about that. I know you are. Um, it's also it's interesting because the state of our country and the health of our country is it's not just the United States, it's a lot of Western nations who've adopted our diet who have the same health problems.
That's right.
Um, what do you notice with clients that you've worked with all the people you've worked with over the years? What do you see the most common chronic ailments are today? And then maybe you can speak to, have you seen when they change and shift their diet protocols, do those symptoms go away? Do they feel better? What's your experience?
So, a lot of clients that I see, on the one hand, they're the clients who have been struggling with autoimmune disease or what you might even consider mystery illness. It's like they see doctor after doctor after doctor, and they're getting loads of blood work done and being put on tons of supplements and still not getting better. So I'll
Hmm.
see clients, they come to me and actually they have a food fear. And so
Yeah,
on the one hand, there's that, right? And that's not to say that they don't still have their symptoms, because they do. They have chronic fatigue, their hormones are all over the place. They have, chronic inflammation, high cholesterol. They're pre-diabetic, young women in their early 30s who are pre-diabetic. Um, to me, that is like a red flag. Like, should be in our prime, right? In
yeah,
our
yeah.
childbearing years when we're in our 30s, early 30s. So I see all those ailments, and the statistic that's coming to mind is that one of the core issues is that 12% of the US population is considered metabolically fit, which means only 12% of us, really don't have a handful of medical diagnoses like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart disease, prediabetes, these types of things. So when you go and you change your diet, simply systematically go back to eating, simple fresh fruits and vegetables, the right amount of, proteins with healthy fats, I do see that these things shift in a major way. People who start a regimen like I just described, they'll say, I feel like I lost 5 pounds this week.
Yeah,
And it's not necessarily maybe that it's being reflected on the scale that they lost 5 pounds, but where you see it like is in their face. And it's
right.
just like the inflammation
Yeah,
leaves their body.
yeah. And that could
So
be
it's
like,
really powerful. It's simple. It's simple. And oftentimes I think we don't want it. We're looking for complication. It's like the ego wants things to be a little bit more complicated, but it
it has
often is
to.
very simple.
Yeah.
Right.
It's its whole mission to keep you completely distracted with complication. When
Yeah.
you talk about inflammation, do you think that inflammation is simply like Arnold Ehret suggested, is just the clogging of the system? I mean, it's just the inability to release waste in the body. And so it's a buildup. And that's why you see people start, you get, if you get puffy or swollen, it's just, it's holding on to that waste and not able to eliminate it. Maybe you could speak to why that's the case. What's causing it, and what types of foods can you eat that will hydrate and loosen it and then break it down and eliminate?
Yeah, it's a great direction to go into. So we have the body is designed, and people argue this all the time. The body is designed to be self-cleaning, to be self-healing, to we have these built-in detox pathways and detox mechanism. What has happened is that since we're eating the foods that are mostly acidic, so think, sugar, caffeine, alcohol, processed grains, processed foods, junk foods, all of that is very acidic. And that's what in a lot of ways adds to that congestion, that mucus, that backlog. So we have these drainage pathways, things like the puffiness, that's the lymphatic system,
Hmm.
right? So you can do simple lymphatic massage at home. And, if you don't have a dry brush, you can simply use a washcloth. And there's tons of videos on Instagram and YouTube about how to do this. But a gentle lymphatic brush every single day can really help to keep the lymph moving. And that's one of the ways the body takes out the trash. We have the liver, we have the kidneys, we have the skin. Sweat is super important. Exercise, rebounding, so jumping on trampoline, that stimulates the lymphatic system. And then aside from the skin, one of the most efficient eliminative organs is the colon. So we have to get the waste out however we can.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I've really tried to embrace and am encouraging people to embrace in the Next Level Detox program, because paired with a very alkaline, nourishing, high vibe, diet of mostly raw fruits and vegetables with proper colon cleansing, I mean, you can feel like a whole new person after 5 short days.
Yeah.
And I think you can probably attest to that.
You can.
Um,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
amazing. And it really doesn't require a lot of time. I feel like the body is so
yeah,
quick to really, really quick to heal. And I think everybody's body's different in that department. But from my own personal experience, I did yours plan for 5 days in November, and then I kept on it because I just felt better, you know. It's
yeah.
like, and I've eaten that way for a very long time, but I do tend to stray sometimes. And my favorite pastime and my husband is just constantly eating chips. And so, I mean, I'm like, and my mom and I talk about this. It's like you take a handful of those things, and whatever they put in them, your hand is just back in that bag. And so, if I find myself just feeling swollen because I've consumed too much crap, it literally just even a couple of days. And once you get the hang of how to actually clean and clear the body, it's like you can do maintenance, right? Oh,
Yeah.
I can just feel it and I'm going to take a couple of days and reset. I mean, it's really amazing. So maybe you can talk a little bit more now about your specific program. Like, give us a sample of what it's like. What kind of food are you putting on there for people? And especially like how have you seen people react? And I'm sure they come from all different food backgrounds too.
Yeah. So I designed this 5 day protocol because it's something that I've been doing personally for a very long time. And I was using it with my clients in my private practice. And I just thought, this is something, it's a protocol that everyone should know how to engage and implement for whatever may come their way. So whether it's, getting over an illness or going into the winter months where we're, craving more comfort foods, whether they're, whatever it is, they're dealing with some, hormone fluctuations, maybe they're feeling low energy. I knew that this protocol within a very short period of time would put them back on the road to Wellville, as our friend Dr. Morris likes
Yes.
to say.
I love that word, Wellville.
I love that word.
I know.
Dr. Morris, Dr. Robert Morris. Um,
He's a good one, by the way, for people that are, need, he's got a ton of information for nothing, right? And just get on there and listen to him rant.
he does. Well, and
Yeah,
his point is well taken, which is, that within chemistry, there are two sides of chemistry, that we have the acid and the alkaline. And most of the substance in the standard American diet, most of what we are taking in, even on a pretty healthy diet, it tends to be acidic. It
hmm,
tends to leave an acidic residue in the body.
yeah,
So what the eating protocol and the dietetic protocol in the next level detox, it's the alkaline. It's as much of the alkaline as possible. Now it's not all alkaline, because if we were to only eat fresh fruit, as like, which is like a very detoxifying food. I know you've done your share
yeah,
of experimenting with all fruit, like I have. If a body is not ready for it, it can send you really into not feeling very well.
yeah,
And so I like to think that the next level detox protocol sort of bridges that gap where you can eat this high alkaline diet as well as some more acidic or dense foods. And that actually serves one to, like, kind of calm the craving monster who's used to having that part of us that's used to having that denser food.
yeah.
But it also slows down the detoxification process. So the foods that are the most alkalizing, like I mentioned, fresh fruit, um, berries, melons, grapes, that type of thing. Now, on the protocol, a large focus is on dark leafy green veggie juices. So this is lemon, ginger, cucumber, dark leafy greens, herbs, and you put all that through a juicer. So you extract the fiber, and then you just drink the what's left, and it's like liquid gold. It's like drinking
It's
sunshine. It's
good.
pure chlorophyll.
I
It's
know.
so good.
You start craving it
And
too. Like, you know what else is really nice? Is it smells good. Like it
I
puts an
know, right?
aroma in your kitchen that's lemony and ginger and the herbs if you're doing parsley in there. I mean, it smells amazing, as opposed to other things that can happen in the kitchen,
I
burning,
literally,
you know.
yeah, sausage, eggs, like
I
when
know.
I have that kind of household where
Yeah.
I'm doing the green juice and then, making the kids like eggs and sausage burritos as they're
Yeah.
running out the door. But I left my juice on the counter, and because I had to run them to meet their carpool, and I came back, and one of the things that I noticed, I was like, wow, it smells just
Smells
so
good.
vibrant in here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
It's pretty cool.
another thing about when you start cleaning up your diet, maybe you can share your own experience with this. And I think this happens over time. When you start taking, especially animal products, um, when you eat cleaner and more plant food, your sensory system, I mean, I don't know about you, but my nose will just, anytime now I smell, I can just pick it up instantly. It's like I don't know, everything's amplified a lot more than maybe it used to be. Do you notice that? Or do you have people that
Do you
say
notice
that?
that? Well, I do. And I think I think what you're speaking to is sort of this ripple effect when we are clearing out congestion in the
Hmm.
body. In some ways, you're clearing out noise and you're freeing up space. And so, what happens in that freed up space? In a lot of ways, I think what you're speaking to is, the body's like innate ability of, like, turning on more of the five senses, and
Yeah,
then tapping more into our sixth sense and our intuition. And that's what I hear a lot from people, is that, the signal's just clearer. And I think that's ultimately what has me, like you, I veer off. I'll do a whole bunch of, baking. I was on a big pumpkin bread, gluten-free
yeah,
pumpkin bread kick over the holiday season. But then I come back, and I keep coming back, because I know that when we are that open, clear channel, there is a heightened sense of everything,
there is. Yeah,
better decision making, quicker, to get the downloads, the creative impulses, with the ability then to create something and to bring something to life, right? So to act
yeah,
on those impulses. Whereas I think, when we're bogged down with health challenges and, um, cravings and like food addictions and these types of things. It keeps us really stuck, focused on those things,
Right.
so in a very contracted sense,
Yeah.
as opposed to a more open, expansive um way of being. And I think when we free up space, when we remove waste, and we're eating really high alkaline foods that is really supercharged with a lot of electrons, um that space, like, your body can do deeper healing, it can do deeper work and repair. So taking care of the inflammation, getting rid of the rogue cells, and the just
Yeah.
like really repairing at a very deep level.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and the deeper you go, lots can happen there. Things that are coming out of you never want to talk about. I mean, you hear Dr. Morse talking about people that have, passed worms and parasites and then showing him, and he's got these. I mean, it's just disgusting when you think about what could be happening inside of our system, It's like a world within a world. Um,
Well, actually, it is. And,
it
and a
is.
lot of, there's a lot of talk about the microbiome. And when we talk about removing waste, people get worried that they're going to remove all their good bacteria. But more often than not, I think that we have this dysbiosis. We have rogue bacteria. If you have massive cravings and headaches and chronic fatigue and, all the things, it is a good chance that it's your gut bacteria. So trillions upon 40 trillion bacteria that potentially could be signaling to your body, to your brain for certain things.
Yeah.
So when we change the food that's coming in, when we change the balance in the microbiome, there is a very real difference in other areas of our lives.
Yeah, and maybe we can talk about this before because it's not something I hear too much about. I've heard it on people that are very extreme with eating only fruit, and I'm not here to advocate anybody eat a certain way, but what do you think about this? There's such a talk about a balanced microbiome, that we should have good and bad bacteria, but I've heard people who say if you were really truly eating a very clean, like let's say we're fruitarians or we're frugivores by nature, because some people argue our teeth are like primates, right? We're the closest
Hmm.
to the primate. The primate eats mostly fruit, maybe some green leafies in the jungle, right? But that's what they
Hmm.
eat, and it's easily digestible. So what I'm wondering and is if you're if you've been transformed your system to handle that kind of a diet, I'm not suggesting you go out and just do this tomorrow, but if that's the case, is there such a thing, a need for good and bad bacteria? Do you see what I'm saying? Because bacteria is cleaning up the crap, right? That's what it's there
Hmm.
for. So the more that's rotting or fermenting, I should say, in the gut or in the system, the more bacteria is needed, right, to help get rid of it. I mean, essentially, if you're saying good bacteria, that's what it's helping get rid of that stuff. I'm just curious. I've heard people talk about that. What do you think about that? Like, if the cleaner you eat, the less need to even worry about what your microbiome is doing. Because a lot of
I
people
mean,
take probiotics all the time, and
yeah, no, I agree with that in a lot of ways. I think the idea is that you can have, like, if you look at a stool test, you can have your good, quote unquote, good guys that are in the green, and then you can have your opportunistic. The opportunistic are in the yellow on a stool test. Those are the bugs that can go either way. Right. And so they could go rogue, meaning that they could, yeah, go rogue and go into the red. And those are things like SIBO, small intestine
Mhm.
bacterial overgrowth, or even parasites, which, we all have parasites. But again, the parasites can kind of take over. Um, or the rogue bacteria can take over. I think what you're talking about more is like more aligning with nature to
Mhm.
eat in a way that your body takes care of itself. And
Right.
in a lot of ways, I think we have to bridge the gap between the person who can be on an all, fruit diet, living in the jungle somewhere in Costa Rica, to, living in the middle of, Colorado in the winter
Right.
with modern day life and kids and schedules. And, you know,
Yeah, it's not
it's,
happening.
we're,
It's
yeah,
not
exactly.
happening.
We have to
Oh,
balance all of that and do the best that we can. But I think that if you eat a colorful diet, I don't necessarily advocate for taking probiotics.
Right.
I advocate for eating the rainbow. The
Yeah.
more color that you have in your diet, the better. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, I don't think that you have to go take a stool test unless, there's a real problem and your body is letting you know, like there could
Yeah.
be something valuable in doing something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the great things that you talk about in your 5-day plan, and this is something I think that could benefit anybody, it doesn't mean you have to change your diet at all, but is food combining. Because
Mm,
I know there's a lot of people that sort of say, oh, that's not a thing. I'm sure a lot of people say, no, it doesn't matter. But personally speaking, I know that if I mix certain things, you're gassy. Where do people think that they're farting all the time? Like,
right.
it's not just it's happening because of the combination of food and that's fermentation going on in the gut. So, can you talk about food combining and what you recommend, what you should eat together, what you shouldn't eat, and what you should eat alone?
Yes, yes. I love this topic. And this is something that I've been doing for years. I brought food combining into the conscious cleanse and with the next level detox. Um, and I'll start by saying that I think there are some people with really strong constitutions digestively who do not have to food combine. Like
Hmm.
they can eat whatever they want. I mean, they think they can eat whatever they want and they don't necessarily get gassy or bloated or constipated. I think
Yeah.
some people have very strong digestive powers. I think a lot of men in general will fall into that category. Not to make a huge generalization, but more often than not, I see women who do not have that strong digestive power like I see a lot of men.
Hmm.
So I have a lot of theories behind that, and I actually think that it's by design. We're meant to be more in tune with the center, with the seat of our intuition, our gut, our inner knowing. I think that's part of being a woman is having that,
Yeah.
deep connection. But back to your question about food combining, it's based on this idea that foods digest at a different rate once they go into the body. So, fruit being largely water and made up of fructose, when it goes into the body, it's going to get converted into sugar and broken down very, very quickly. In most cases, about 30 minutes. So I always say eat fruit alone or leave it alone because so often, I don't know where this came from, people thought they were being healthy by having fruit for dessert.
I
It's
know.
one of the worst things you can do, especially after a big cooked meal with animal
Mhm.
protein, because, like you said, what happens that the meal, say it was, some meat and some grains and some veggies, it's probably going to take 3 to 4 hours for the body to break down and digest. If the fruit comes in after that, it is going to break down and ferment on top. So that is where you get into a lot of gas, a lot of bloating,
Yeah.
constipation, in some cases diarrhea and that sort of thing. So the idea of food combining has been around for a long time, and I always just encourage people to try it. And there are things that should never touch in the stomach, but there are things that really combine with everything. So the base of a lot of the next level detox are dark leafy greens and non-starchy veggies. So you can pretty much take your dark leafy greens, sprouts, microgreens, non-starchy, water rich containing veggies like tomatoes and cucumbers and radishes, those types of things, and combine them with either a baked starch or an animal protein. So
Hmm.
the baked starch, could be a sweet potato or butternut squash. It could be non-gluten grains, although I think most people that I see these days, they don't do that well with grains. And I think that speaks to another issue around inflammation and just not having that digestive power,
Yeah.
being able to break that starch down. Maybe it's a food combining issue.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, so that's the idea is that, you could take your non-starchy and dark leafy greens and pair them with either a starch or a protein, but you don't want to combine the protein and the starch because
Right.
again, it makes it too difficult for the body to break down. And then you look into the proteins and you can look into the starches and say which one of those break down even easier, which leaves less of an acidic residue in the body. So fish tends to be very easy for people to break down. Eggs, in terms of animal protein, for people to break down. They're just lighter. They're
Right.
easier on the digestive system. So that encourages people to, not only get the protein and the nourishment from the food, but also to be able to be ready to have an epic release, which is the other half of, this system, this protocol.
Yeah. So before we get into that part of it, because let's talk about the waste.
Yeah.
um, what about fats? What are fats good in terms of you can eat them with green leafies? What else? Can you eat them with proteins, starches? Like, what's the best on that?
I always think about the fat as sort of an add-on, right? So fat can be eaten alone. Actually, if you're in a fasted state, say you have a green juice and you're just like, I'm still really hungry, but you're mostly in a fasted state, you put something like a handful of olives in, and that can actually help your body stay in a fasted state while giving your brain sort of that
Mhm.
healthy fat that it needs to run optimally. In terms of food combining, you know, if you're being really strict, it would be really in a category of its
Its
own.
own. Yeah.
Yeah, but again, going with so a category of its own, meaning it combines with the non-starchy veggies and the dark leafy greens. I love avocado.
Yeah.
I know that like putting a little bit of avocado or a little bit of olive oil can make things rich and creamy and delicious. And so
Yeah.
there are a lot of foods on the next level detox or in the protocol that they're there for taste. They're there for pleasure. They're there because they're just
They're
rich and
good.
yummy, right? They're
Yeah.
good and they're satiating.
Yeah.
And they also have, health benefits as well. They help to keep us full and grounded, and they're good for, like I mentioned, the brain and the skin, and helping us to feel juicy and hydrated. So they do have their place.
Yeah.
In moderation, I think that's the other thing that people adopt, going back to sort of like the extremists. And maybe we were talking about that before we started recording, but,
I know.
um, finding what works for you. And then again, in moderation,
Mm.
like you don't have to eat this way for the rest of your life if you don't want
No.
to, but you could implement it a couple times a year and your body will be better off.
Oh, yeah. It's good to have this knowledge because I feel like every person should know how to clean themselves, heal themselves, make themselves feel better. That doesn't really cost anything. It does. And in fact, you're eating less. So you're not, it's just knowledge and wisdom that I think, like, I look at nature all the time and I watch animals and it's like they know what to do. They know exactly what to do. And why are we so idiotic in this department? I don't. But
Right.
again, it's that
They're big
distraction.
brains.
We're so distracted by all the information, and you think nature, animal, they're just out and they just see what they see. They don't have somebody yapping in their ear about what's good for them and what's not. It's like I'm going to eat this because I need to survive.
Yes, because I found it. Because look, oh, it's here. Oh, yeah, this is edible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they must go through a fasting in the winter, right? Because I look at the deer, we're just surrounded by deer all the time, and they look fine, but they can't be eating as much right now. It's just
No, and that's, I
interesting.
would say, a very unpopular opinion in nutrition circles, like telling
Yes.
people to eat less.
Oh, I know.
And the truth of the matter is, like with our modern day conveniences, people are, again, only 12% of us are metabolically fit. What everybody else, if you're grazing all day long and not having, these periods where you can actually, go without food, like that's something that we need to train our body to
Hmm.
tap into stored fat and to not like I see so many people, they freak out the second
Yeah,
that hunger hits. Like they think something, and in a lot of cases, if you have, hypoglycemia, or your blood sugar is all over the place and you've had
yeah.
experiences with that, it comes
Diabetics,
from this
yeah.
fearful place that,
Mm.
yeah, that, they don't want that to happen. So we have to move slowly in a lot of
Yeah.
cases. and teach the body again how to do this in a way that is safe and really effective, but
Right.
also that really honors what the body is capable of.
Yeah. Well, what I love about your 5 day plan is that it's doable. Like you're not starving. You have wonderful food. Jules makes great food, you guys. I'm not kidding. Like I love all your recipes. You have cookbooks, 2 cookbooks. I'm going to link all this in the show notes because you have a lot of great stuff. And you're not starving on your plan. You've got a simple system and you can adjust however you want. Like you are hungry, eat more. If you're somebody
Hmm.
who's been doing this a long time and you want to cut back on how much you're taking in, you can. You know, it's
Yeah.
like it's such a great launching point, I feel like. And I can't speak enough about it. It's just great. So, can we talk now about the part of it that I think is really important is the detoxification aspect, the elimination of waste. There's a lot of discussion about cleansing. As you know, you had the conscious cleanse, and that's the big thing. Do a cleanse, do a cleanse. But if you're just tossing up a lot of toxicity in the body and you're not able to eliminate it, that's when we start feeling like crap, which happened to me recently. But it's what happens. So, can you speak to the waste removal process and what you're doing on your plan?
Yeah, yeah. So I talk about this idea that a true cleanse only occurs, and a cleanse is an event that occurs when massive amounts of waste leave the body. So I think where a lot of plans and programs get it wrong, and this is like our tendency, I think, as a culture to say, what am I going to eat? What pills? What shakes? Like, what is going to go into the body, as opposed to focusing on the other end, which is what is coming out of the body. So I don't know where the quote came from, but it's the quote that says, healing. You can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. I get that right? You can't
Hmm.
heal in the same environment that made you sick. So without the removal of the waste, it's just like, cleaning your garage without taking a bunch of stuff to the dumpster,
Yeah.
without taking the stuff to the Goodwill. You just like are moving stuff around. I mean, you're like a professional space cleaner
I
and
was going to
clear
say it's like
clutter
hoarding.
cleaner. Yeah. Yeah, hoarding, but I also think that, I think yeah, it is like yes, it's like holding on to things and saying, well, I'm going to just stuff it over in this corner, or I'm going to put it over in this little, place where you can't see it.
Yeah.
A true cleanse, you really have to get the waste out. And there's a couple different ways that we do that. So in the next level detox, I talk about a two-prong approach, which is activate and eliminate. So the activate is the nourishment. It's the food that we were talking about, the fresh fruits, the green juices, the raw green rainbow salads, and then a place for cooked foods, soups, broths, that type of thing. And then the other side of that approach is the elimination. So as I mentioned before, the body has these detox pathways, and we can call on all of them, but the main one that we focus on in the next level detox is the colon.
Right.
And how do you cleanse the colon? So, it's interesting. The more I talk about colon cleansing and enemas, the more people like come out of the woodwork. I was on a walk with someone brand new yesterday, didn't even know her. And she's like, oh, yeah, I totally do coffee enemas all the time. And
Oh,
I'm
how
like,
funny.
that's amazing. So it's not
Yeah.
something that a lot of, obviously, people don't necessarily want to talk about it, but I think it's really important that we do because, you know, again, it's been culturally taboo that we don't talk about what happens in the bathroom. Like
Oh,
we
yeah.
tell our kids like no poopy talk at the dinner table. It's like, well, that's actually where a kid is like a perfect example. They sit down, they have a bite of food, their
Yeah.
vagus nerve signals the body like, oh, a train is coming in the tunnel, a train has to leave,
Believe.
the
Yeah.
tunnel. So kids, like you look at kids, much like you look at nature, you're like, that's the way the body's supposed to work,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So,
Well, when you have a small child, and I know probably you notice this with your kids, I raised my kids on plant food until they got older
Mhm.
and now they eat whatever the heck they want. But when they were very young, I raised them that way and they were eliminating constantly. There was no such thing as constipation for them. When I know a
Yeah.
lot of kids struggle with that, a lot of
Oh, they
them.
really
Because a
do.
lot of them are
Yeah.
drinking dairy and this whole thing. And it's funny because
Yeah.
people used to say, you don't give your kids milk. I'm like, well, no. And I have like Layla, one of my oldest daughters, is like, she was always just skyrocketed tall, like if people say, well, you can't have strong bones if you don't have milk. I'm like, well, I don't know if something else is happening there, you
Yeah,
know?
something else is going on because they are
Yeah.
perfectly healthy.
But you're
Yeah.
so right that what you put in should be eliminated. And when years and years goes by and people are eating whatever they're eating, and more than half of it is probably not coming out, that's when we have major waste buildup in the colon. And can you talk about, I mean, how long this could take people who have compacted waste, right? Really, and
Yeah.
you don't have to be a large person to have compacted waste. You could be very thin
Right.
and still have this buildup. Can you speak about colonics or colon hydrotherapy too as another avenue that probably should be addressed if you're really struggling in that department?
Yeah, I think so. The way that I share this in the next level detox is that you can either learn how to do an enema at home, which is a little bit more involved, a little bit more up and down. There's some technique, but it's also something that, aside from the 11 or $14 that you spend on Amazon, you're going to have that in your medicine cabinet, if you will, for any time you need it. So you don't have to go anywhere. You can literally just pull it out and learn how to use it.
Right.
And so I teach people how to do that. And what we're talking about with colon cleansing, just to back up, and I bet a lot of your audience knows, but we're talking about gently introducing water into the colon by way of the rectum. And so, again, through an enema would be an at-home approach. You can also see a colon hydrotherapist, so a professional will do this. And there's a lot of different systems out there. Um, I often will recommend a Wood's gravity method. So it's again a very gentle way that water is entering your body, and then your body's peristalsis kicks in to push the waste out. So it is, again, it's very gentle. You really want to work with, someone who you feel comfortable and safe with. But the colon hydrotherapy or working with a professional is a little bit better in the sense
Mhm.
that you can go further and deeper. You can get water all the way around to, the transverse colon. So you have the descending colon, which you'll get to when you're doing an enema. It can go even further than that if you do a colonic, typically not the first time.
Yeah.
I know you and I have shared this journey together doing colonics for the first time personally, and being like, wow, can you imagine? Like, did you see
Yeah.
what came out? The first time I ever did a colonic with our shared friend,
Yeah.
um, I mostly just took the water in and not a lot of waste was
Oh,
released.
interesting.
So I
Yeah.
was that dehydrated
Wow.
that I really was just hydrating the colon and the
Huh.
tissues. So then, and this can happen to some people where they might not release that much. And that
Yeah.
if you continue, to go back again with the advice of a professional colon hydrotherapist, and you eat the diet that tees up the waste, meaning that you create an alkaline environment, your body will just continue to dump waste. So I've done 10-day juice fasts, and you think I'm not eating any real food. There can't be that much mass coming
Right.
out. I don't know where it comes from,
It's
but it
coming
just
from.
keeps dumping
Yeah.
massive amounts of waste. And again, not eating like, that's not what the next level detox is, but that's been my experience doing like fast and long juice cleanses where waste matter just keeps coming out. It's not just from the meal that, you had
Right.
yesterday.
Yeah.
It's old.
It's
And people, I've
old.
had clients say, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but when they are dumping waste, sometimes they'll have a craving for a food that they haven't eaten in decades.
Oh, I've
Like, where
heard
did that
this.
come from?
Yeah. All of a sudden they
Yeah.
haven't eaten something in years and they're wanting it. Yeah.
They're like, wow, I'm all of a sudden craving a, burrito from Taco Bell.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, when you're saying if you're not eating and you're dumping waste, can you talk about mucoid plaque? This whole concept that there's a plaque buildup along the colon or digestive tract. And this happens over time, right? Just the buildup of waste and it's black. I mean, I've seen pictures of this stuff. Again, I don't think the medical world acknowledges that there's anything backing up anything. But I've seen people that have eliminated this. It's disgusting, like this black stringy junk coming out, but they do it when they're fasting and it's coming out and it's awful. It's like a putrid, disgusting mess. Have you,
Yeah.
can you talk about that for those of you still listening?
For those of you still listening, what was I just going to say? Well, you know what you made me think of is that people will say, "Oh, I've done a colonoscopy. I had
Hmm.
pink tissue. I'm, clean as a whistle." I don't know that that's actually the case.
No.
Like for most people, I don't know that I can speak any more to the mucoid plaque than you already did, except to say that there are just deeper and deeper levels and layers. And I think that it's not a one-time event, this
No.
detox journey. This is something, again, to learn how to do and implement several times a year. I think maybe with the seasons, maybe monthly. If you're really sick, you might actually go and do this for 3, 4 months, 5 months in a row and see how much better you can feel, and then go more into a maintenance mode.
Yeah.
I didn't answer your question about the mucoid plaque, but
Well, that's all
there
right.
are just disgusting pictures of
I know.
what can come out. It's like a tar.
Yeah, it looks like tar. Yeah,
Hmm.
and if you think about, I mean, it kind of makes sense logically speaking. If you're talking about food like starchy, gluten, sticky material that is not eliminated, then it makes sense that it's literally sticking to the lining of your digestive tract. I mean, that makes sense.
Right.
It's like
Yeah, and
gum, you know?
it's like gum, it's sticky, and the body it works really hard to eliminate, um, meat products, processed food, grains, and, breads, pastas. Like it is also very sticky and it's very difficult for the body to get rid of. So
Yeah,
there is a toxic, residue that gets left behind. And that's what, accumulates year after year after year. And maybe you go on a clean eating program of some sort and you feel a whole bunch better. But then after a while, the body adapts. And then all of a sudden, that way of eating, that clean eating, doesn't make you feel quite as good.
yeah,
I do believe it's because of that accumulation.
yeah. Well, and that if that's blocking the way that nutrients are absorbed also, right? If
Yeah,
there's a barrier there, then we're not really taking in the nutrition that we're eating, which
right.
is sort of this idea that we're still kind of starving. But when you
Yeah,
remove it, let's say, like you're saying, we're removing waste, we're eliminating the congestion, and this isn't just colon, but in your program, it's colon, but the body will do it everywhere. That once that stagnation, I guess, that's removed, there's now an efficient transport of oxygen to the cell itself, which would explain why you feel much more energy, much more alive, and then you don't need as much, right? I mean, you don't. And I know people will say, oh, we need all this food, we need snacks, we need to eat every 2 hours. In my personal experience, the better I eat, the less I eat, the more energy that I have. The second I go and start eating heavier, which I love food. I'm not going to stop ever eating. And I'm not suggesting that, but I'm just saying, just you can do these where you notice in a cleanse or you're eating less. I mean, and then if you don't eat at all, you're talking about what we mentioned before is you can start feeling like out of the body, like very light in the experience. And that's where you get into the whole spiritual thing where people say they have these experiences. It is possible, it's very possible. So I don't
yeah.
know what your thoughts are on that, but it just seems like it would make sense for an easier exchange of nutrition and oxygen flow to the body.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think for listeners is to get really curious. Like, one of the things in the early days when I was really getting into healing the body naturally with foods and detoxes and this sort of things, I had a cookbook. Maybe you had her cookbook, Alyssa Cohen. It was a huge
Yeah,
book, and
yeah,
half of it was all about the stories of transformation. So people
yeah,
who had lost 100 pounds, who cleared up their skin, reversed their diagnosis, like just amazing. I always wanted to spend my time reading those stories because that's where I think, you can get really curious of like, if they can do it, and this is the, method, eating, raw living foods, learning how to cleanse the body,
Yeah,
if they can have this epic shift in their physical body, what else is possible? What's possible for me? What's possible for you?
right.
That's where I think, being your own N of one experiment, like try it for yourself and see how you feel. And I think, nobody can take that experience away from you. So that's
No,
what's so, I think, fun and empowering. And, frankly, it's optimistic, it's positive, it's a positive way to look at, what we have control over, which
right.
very much is oftentimes, yes, it's about the food that we put in, but it's also about, learning how not to and learning how to remove that
Yeah,
what's no longer needed.
right. Well, I just think that it's such good information for like everybody to have because while we're here, everybody wants to, I wouldn't say, I should not say that. Most people want to feel well. I think there's a lot of people who benefit from saying they're not well all the time. Then you get into that whole side of things, but
Yeah,
you want
yeah.
to feel like, at least for myself, I know I want to live however long I'm here, at least feel good while I'm here. At least feel like I'm mobile and I can get around and I'm not looking at a life of pain. Even though if that happens, it happens. I'm in the
Yeah.
mindset that, we can't totally control everything here, but I do think that you're offering something so amazing. And it's very simple. It's just so simple. If only people would commit, and get a little taste and then realize you can do it periodically throughout the year or whenever you need to.
And can I just add to that,
Yeah.
you mentioned cookbooks and recipes, and my idea with the Next Level Detox was that it was very simple, that it was literally like you could, make a very simple soup with under 7 ingredients, that you could, have a cup of olives and some carrots, like that you didn't have to go gourmet and spend all this
Hmm.
time in the kitchen chopping, but like, again, simplify. And I think the more we simplify our approach to our health and our nutrition, the better off we'll be.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like there are lots of ways that you could spend your time. And for a
Yeah.
while, you might want to spend your time in the kitchen and, shopping and prepping and creating beautiful things. But there are other times where you just want to go out for a hike.
I
And so you don't
know.
want to spend all the time in the kitchen.
No, I'm sure you can share this experience. When you first kind of dive into a new way of eating, you get really into it. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I had so many books and I bought all this stuff and I loved making tons of food. And my kids were little and I wanted to make sure that they were eating, I knew what they were eating. And then as I've gotten a little bit older, they don't really, I don't know if they don't like my stuff or they just have their own methods of what food is. There's, I feel simplicity in eating is just, I just like it so much better. You don't have to have 15 different items on your plate. In fact, that's harder on the digestion. So, yeah, I like the simplicity aspect. Maybe before we wrap up here, let's talk about one more thing if you have the time.
I'm game.
I want to talk about this thing that we were discussing before, and that is sort of where health is sort of going with technology. And you brought this to my attention, this documentary that's out there called Don't Die, right?
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
about this guy who's trying to defy, sounds like, and I haven't seen the whole thing, you have, so I'm going to let you talk about it. But he's trying to defy death. I mean, that's what he sounds literally trying to do. And more power to you, man, whatever you want to do.
Yep.
But
Yep.
can you speak to this? Like, what these extremes that are possible, and then maybe what's coming with technology, because it's something to be aware of.
Yeah. Well, so the documentary in the is Don't Die, and Brian Johnson is the billionaire tech who invested, millions of dollars to create a lab and in his own house, and he has a very strict regimen. He doesn't eat anything past 11 a.m. He's taking, I think, 40 some supplements, and he's really tracking, and he has metrics on reversing his biological age, which I think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, I'm like you, like more power to you. Let's take this information and, take his example and say, okay, what of this can I actually implement into my life? And one of the things that he said, which I don't think I shared this with you, he talks about demoting the mind and elevating the body. And this idea of elevating the body, I think, comes back to the way that we're moving, eating, sleeping, fasting. So there's a big focus in his regimen that is fasting, and he's hungry and he's not comfortable at all, but
Yeah.
he is like, he's on a mission. But again, if we can take some of these elements and really glean benefit and implement them in a way where we can still live our lives the way we want to,
Yeah.
you know, then I think there's benefit to that. Um, to answer your question about technology, the thing that concerns me about his approach, he's talking about defying death. And yet he's not talking much about detox. He's really not talking about waste removal and
No.
the fact that, yes, he's regenerating and he's doing, plasma
I
transfusions
know.
and stem cell therapy and like really going to the extremes, but
Yeah.
he's not removing waste from his system.
No.
So that to me makes me, and he's not really talking about detox in general. Now, he's eating a very clean, pristine diet. And so
Yeah.
maybe he would argue that he doesn't need to detox. But I think given what we've talked about here is like, you can't really avoid exposure. I
No.
mean, most of us can't. We're going to get it through, the air we breathe, the water, the furniture. I mean, we didn't really even talk about our toxic exposure,
No. That's a whole nother
but
topic.
that's
Yeah.
a whole nother topic. But, in terms of, technology and where we're going, it's interesting to see the way our lives will improve with technology, and bringing sort of AI into the health space is something that I'm very curious about. But I think it's also why we need to, at the end of the day, understand our true nature,
Right.
to your whole mission of like, how does this body work,
Yeah.
like what is our true nature, and can we please not lose sight of the miraculous beings that we are without the technology? Like, let's like make sure that we establish that as, as our
Right.
foundation.
Because there is a very strong push that the computer, that the AI is the new God. I mean, it is the new, everything we're doing now, we're going to be consulting with the computer. And there is an agenda behind that. It's not just, you don't just see it everywhere out of nowhere without some strong money backing push, right? It didn't just
Hmm.
manifest overnight. This has been in the works for a long time. And I
Yeah.
guess I love technology. I think it's cool. But I also think that our main computer of our own consciousness and who we are and our intuition specifically is the computer. And
Right.
when we hand it over to always checking in with the devices and all this stuff, we're literally losing our own internal knowledge and wisdom that we already have. It's sitting right there. I mean, there are
Yeah.
medical intuitives who can see through their own intuition what's wrong with you. They
Yeah.
don't have a computer, they're not measuring blood work, they're not doing any of that. So it would be nice to see that. And there are people that do that. But as you know, the world is controlled by money. I mean, it is.
Hmm.
It's like
Hmm.
it or not, that's what we're living in. Luckily, there's pockets of us around, that don't feel the same way, that want to continue to live our lives naturally and using the modern day things that are there, but not becoming so dependent on them that you totally lose sight of sort of this inner world that's there too.
Yeah, and we have no idea what the repercussions are. I mean, I talk to people who are very sensitive to EMFs and,
Hmm.
being on the screens and the cell phones and
Yeah.
computers, and even just the frenetic nature of living in a city. They're
Oh,
very
yeah.
sensitive to it. They've lost, they feel very anxious. So in terms of the computer, sort of dictating everything, I add those to those lists of invisible toxins that we don't really know how they're going to affect our nervous system,
Yeah. Yeah.
and at the end of the day, that's something that I think is really important for all of us to pay attention to. Like, pay attention to your nervous system, because your
Oh, yeah.
personality, your ego on the outside could be like, oh yeah, I got this, everything's all good. But the nervous system could be like fried on the
Freaking out.
inside.
Speaking
Yeah.
from experience, it can. And then you have to learn how to become a master of your own nervous system, which means you become a true listener of it.
Right.
You're listening to it. So, well,
Mm.
we could go on and on and on for hours, and maybe we'll have you on again. But I do want to just wrap up today, and please tell everybody where we can find you. I know it's just Jules Nutrition, but tell everybody where they can sign up, because you have a detox starting on the 14th of March, right? The 5-day
Yep,
plan.
that's
Yeah.
right. The next level detox starts March 14th, and everything can be found at justjulesnutrition.com, and also on social media. I'm sure you'll link all the things.
Yeah, I will.
And there is a master class in the works here in a couple weeks. So check out my website, my social media for a detox master class
Oh, cool.
that I'm going to
I'm
be doing
excited.
here shortly. Yeah.
Very exciting. Well, thank you so much, Jules. I always love talking to you, and thanks for sharing your knowledge with everybody. And I really hope that everyone listening do go and check Jules' stuff out. I'm not kidding. It will really help you, and maybe, just maybe, it will change your eating habits and your life and how you feel.
Thank you, Lindsay.
That'll wrap up today's show. Until next time, I invite you to check out my website at livelikeeden.com. You can sign up for a weekly email reminder when my new podcast and blog comes out, which is every Wednesday. If you're struggling with your own awakening process and you need further assistance or guidance, you can also sign up for a free consult, and I would be more than happy to work with you. If you're enjoying the show, I ask that you share it with others that you think it might benefit. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.